were like adamant, right? Also had people who said, yeah, well, terms of my divorce decree, yeah, I'm not gonna marry again. So yeah, I'll do a life partnership. That quite possibly is a financial arrangement. It could be a custody issue. Maybe something in divorce decree says, well, if you marry again, if the custodial parent marries again, custody of the children automatically shifts to the other parent. There are a lot of other things. So no, if you went with a divorced person and you looking at getting together, look at that divorce decree. Don't let them just tell you. Lay eyes on it. Lay eyes on it. So for yourself what the obligations are. Mario, you deal with that in your counseling, I'm sure. But
yeah, absolutely.
And the other one I actually saw from widows and widowers who were just like, saying either one of two things. That pain was so great was one. The other one was like I mentioned earlier. Well, hey, I had the best marriage with the best person, my best friend, but I'm still here. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's worth kind of talking about just a little bit, because to me, that's one of those things that really falls into that, you know what? I 100% understand why you won't do this again.
Well, if you got retirement and all that kind of stuff, some folks are saying, I ain't finna mess my money up. Now, y'all can call me.
I stayed away from that.
Well, I'm going to go there because you got some that want some companionship, but they get their husband's pension, and they're not about to mess their money flow up. All right? It's about that dollar, and they're not going to compromise that because that husband died and left them set. So they will say, okay, listen, I held up the bloodstained banner all these years, but guess what? I got to have me some companionship, and I ain't finna mess my money up. That's a reality. See, that's what I'm saying. I am not so up in the clouds that I do not understand case by case basis and why people are led to the decisions in which they make. And that's almost legitimate. The person would say, I ain't dead. I want companionship. I want company, but I ain't finna give up no dollars. So we're not going to get married, daddy. But come on over here and visit mama and we'll be companions. All right? Because it's a financial situation. And at the end of the day, everything's going to roll back around to finances anyway. It's going to roll back around to finances because when the fallout happens, whether it's a life partnership or marriage, I promise you, it's still going to be about money. At the end of the day, it's still going to come back around to money.
Mario, you're so cynical. It's not just about money.
No, it is. It is. It is about that money. We love each other. We can love each other. But this is what I've noticed, LeTonya. I've noticed people that would say they were totally in love. But the first thing that happens in the breakup is they figure the financial piece out. And the first thing that's normally said, take them for what they got. Take it all. Get it all. I used to hear this lady say her husband would play with her, right? And say, tell your mama, I got a girlfriend. You know what she would say? Tell him that's fine because when I get through with him, he won't have no money to take out to dinner because I'm going to clean him out. See, it's still that financial piece there. I'm not saying that's with everybody, but you got to admit that when things hit the fan, you are looking at the financial piece. And that ain't got nothing to do with love for real. Because I do believe that you can love a person, and when something happens, you still gonna look out for yourself. You go into that mode, and I'm not getting ready to beat anybody up about that. That's just what we do. You know what I mean? So,
well, yeah, I mean, who ain't thinking about self-preservation? Because at the end of the day, when let me say this: there's a saying amongst litigators that the courtroom is like a battlefield. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? When you get there, you ready to rock and roll. See, this is why, we talk about strategy. We talk about this. We talk about that. That's why I always tell people, the more that you can account for up front and settle and come to an agreement on, the better off your life is going to be. Because at the end of the day, I typically see both sides walk away and not be happy.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not happy. And I'm not talking about just because a relationship dissolved, you ain't get what you wanted and the other side didn't either.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But attorneys leave and they get paid. Judges get their money And then they don't care about your relationship, but you got to still be family in some sort and sense of the word. Normally, usually you got some type of ties and some type of connections. But one other thing, because we do have a little bit of time left, that I do want to address. Mario, you brought this up earlier. You kind of alluded to like the different religious cultures and things like that, and community property states, non-community property states. For those of you that are in religious cultures that do get married by contract, right? Which means that you get married by contract. Your marriages may not be viewed as marriages. So it's just like you got to understand whether it's a community property state. You also have to understand if this religious marriage is a marriage under your state law. Because if it isn't, you may still be doing this all for naught. Now, I'm sure that there are provisions in place for those of you that actually do it through your religious sect. I'm sure that I would think that they make sure that you're covered, because everybody doesn't subscribe to, everybody ain't gonna do right at the end of the day. Right. When they don't love you anymore, or you ain't pretty, or whatever it is, they don't like you, whatever the reasons are, or they like somebody better. You just never know. So I think that you also have to look at those types of things too, because like Mario said, a lot of what we talk about, of course, is based on Christianity, because that's what we both that's what we both tend to follow, but kingdom principles. But I think that you also have to think about the wider audience. And the fact that there are people that get married through, contracts or written covenants. Do you have any experience with that, Mario, or have you seen that much in your practice?
Well, I'm gonna tell you what. Back in 2010, the Pew Research Group started tracking how many people were opting to live together, even in Christian communities, and still do family. They held on to the Christian values, but they decided to live together. What I discovered from following that research over the years is that the divorce rate left a stain in their mind. And so they decided not to do it based upon what they observed. And so they found rhythm with a person and decided, we will do it differently from our parents. We're going to do it differently because we have felt the pain. We've seen the disgust. We've experienced how it feels to go through this. We've seen the financial cost to it. So we're going to do it differently based upon what we have seen. And they start developing a plan to just live together while they're still holding on to their religious values. And so for me, being a global thinker, I had to begin to start thinking, but what if people are going to live like this? What is our response to that? We must understand that people are different now. Times change. Our culture is different. We know that the word of God remains the same. His statutes and his laws are the same. But what we're finding, even in those strict religious communities, they're now bending rules. They're now making adjustments now because they've got to deal with a generation who's saying we're not going to do it that way. And so what I recognize is that we do have to think broader, open the lens a little bit, and see that the question that they were asking is, are they being more successful by just living together or having life partnerships versus what their parents experienced in having traditional marriages? And there was legitimate empirical evidence that showed that there indeed has been. So again, it's so individual, and we can cite a number of things in our belief system. But at the end of the day, I believe that each person has to decide to do everything according to your belief system, because that's what it boils down to. What is your belief system? If it is that I'm to be married, then you got to do that. If you're not convicted by that, you got to figure out that whole thing. But we wanted to have the conversation tonight to be able to say that there is no judgment here to anybody. But whatever you decide to do, Real Perspectives are telling you now, we have no judgment, even though we see things a little bit differently, which is great. But we do agree that each person has to have this conversation. Whether you decide to get married, just don't make your choice based upon the pain of your first marriage or your second marriage and then try to redo it this way. And you still, because you were built to be married the way you know to be married, you go in with an expectation that is still the same, but you somehow believe this is going to be differently, done differently, and you see it differently. I think that that's the part you don't want to do because it's going to be the same because you expect a certain thing and you got to be honest about that.
Yeah, and then the person that you're with, if they're moving forward thinking like, okay, we just gonna do this forever, then there's that bait and switch. Because once you say, okay, yeah, we in this life partnership, we're gonna make this move, we're gonna start, whatever that is. Like I said, whatever those terms are, okay, look, I ain't going nowhere, you ain't going nowhere, whatever. And whatever those terms are, whether it's moving in together, commingling funds, all of these things that we've talked about tonight, and then you become the beast.
Tony, let me ask you a question. Because we got like 3 minutes though. So with the contract, because you deal with contracts, if a person comes to you or the couple comes to you, what does it look like if they're sitting in front of you saying, LeTonya, we've agreed that we're not getting married, but we want a contract and we want you to spell out the terms. What does that look like to the couple sitting in front of you? What do you discuss with them?
Well, we talk about everything. I talk about everything that I would talk about if they were sitting in front of me as a married couple discussing a prenuptial agreement.
Okay.
Prenuptial, postnuptial agreement. I talk to them about all of that because at the end of the day, that's really what you're talking about. It's a number of things. There's estate planning involved. There's a lot of different facets of law that come together. But quite frankly, my conversation with them would be no different than a married couple. Quite frankly, I tell everybody that's married, if you got anything, right, especially my over 40 folks, you need to have a prenuptial agreement anyway, right? And now, I mean, you good. We just got 3 minutes, so they won't boycott me. But seriously, that's what that conversation looks like. It looks very much, that consultation is very much like I would talk to them because you got to remember there are lots of things usually. And I know we've been talking about people over 40. Oftentimes, the people I deal with, it's not their first marriage. Mm-hmm. They have children from a previous marriage or relationship that's not with this person. So there are a number of things that you really do have to talk about so that they know. Because if you don't, especially in that situation, if you don't, you may be stuck in a situation where the person that you really want making your decision still can't.
But you know what's interesting about this, though? I think that we just tapped into something that I'm just thinking about. So what if the person who is even having a traditional marriage, the marriage license, the ceremony, would also visit an attorney and even get the expectations in writing because they've had a clear, cohesive conversation about those expectations. And like you said, it's really just a prenup for real. But what if it's kind of sort of like that? But I'm saying, what if everybody went and did that process and so that everybody would be clear about what they're expecting to happen in this relationship? Like, do you think that would be better? Like you would, because if you had partners, you know?
Not necessarily, not sitting down with a lawyer. The reason I made that statement, I think that you need to sit down with a lawyer, especially if you have a business, if you have assets going into the marriage, not necessarily to create a prenuptial agreement, but so that you guys understand like what you have, what's at stake, and all of that and the implications of that. Just quickly, because I know we just have 1 minute, I'll just give a quick example. Like I may own property with a family member, right? I'm an unmarried woman. I may own property with a family member. Well, when I get married, what about my interest in that property? What type of interest do I have in that property? And so on and so forth, right? And I'm just using that just as a quick and dirty example. Like there are things that you need to have that review. You need to have that consultation individually and jointly, because I think that at some point that conversation needs to be a part of marriage counseling. We've talked about that. I do think that there's some legal things that need to go on in the marriage counseling sessions so that they understand, especially when you're talking about assets, when you're talking about debt, when you're talking about all of those things, you need to understand what happens to that debt. You know, if